were leveraged to uphold this mission? Has this represented also a financial opportunity for the maintenance for our ports and civilian infrastructure? And has there been a return on investment for the residents of Puerto Rico?
Like the Real Admiral said and the Secretary said, Puerto Rico is in a point strategically in the sense of the geopolitical situation that's going on in the world. We have 9 regional airports. We're right in the middle of the Caribbean. We are the door for the Caribbean. We're right in the middle in countries like Venezuela. We are right next to all the East Coast and the important port infrastructure that's in those areas. The military has been a crucial part in the last few months in the Ports Authority. They've become not a component, if not business partners, in the sense of everything. They've come into the airport. They fixed old infrastructure. They took a watchtower that's been out of order for many decades and transformed it in 2 weeks. They're generating not only rents and different fees for the Ports Authority, but they've also helped the local economy. When we're talking about hotels, food, taxes for the municipalities, we're talking about different investment when it comes to roads, security. They fixed a lot of electric infrastructure. The Real Admiral mentioned Roosevelt Roads. They are currently there, the 85% occupant of those facilities. This is providing Puerto Rico to become a focal point for military operations. They could tell that it's working. We have 9 regional airports. The government of Puerto Rico has invested over $500 million in all of them to ensure we have the facilities for military operations like these to take place, not only in Ceiba, but in Aguadilla and Ponce. And there's more spaces to come and more opportunities for military operations to take place in Puerto Rico. So yes, they've become a great partner, and the benefits economically go beyond paying rent for the Ports Authority. We can see it in the different regions and the economic development that is turned into tourism, food, and different types of industries.
Can you explain a little bit, because I know that pre the capture of Nicolás Maduro, there was a lot being said on the press, especially on the local press, about, there's some confusion about these NOTAM alerts, which are issued by the federal FAA, do not allow certain flights to go around that area because of military activity. There were also some myths about renewed bombing around the area. So can you explain a little bit about how that is not true, what was actually going on at the time?
As you know, military operations are complicated. A lot of commercial travelers go through there, private planes go through there. So there's certain zones around the Ceiba area and Vieques which are restricted, no-flying zones, but it's not restricted per se. It's just a warning letting you guys know that there's operations going on there, and you have to take the measures necessary for you not to get affected by them. When it comes to Vieques, for many years, there's been cleaning up with the old mines and all the old ammunition that's stored there in Vieques. The no-fly zone is when the military is taking care of those old ammunitions and during the cleaning process. So there's nothing to worry about. I know that during the Maduro operations, the airspace was closed, but the government of Puerto Rico acted. We had a plan in place. We worked together, the Secretary and other government agencies, because we knew that we were capable of attacking and dealing with these type of situations. We worked on it like it was just a regular delay, like it was a snow day. That's the way we're working, and we're working in unison to show that we're ready to deal with any type of operations that come forward.
I was just going to put it in context for you. At any given day in the United States, there's over 70,000 NOTAMs that are out there. So you could be flying through any area in the continental United States or anywhere, and there's actually 70,000 NOTAMs on any given day that are active. Globally, there's over 250,000 to 300,000 any day. So it's not unusual. It's not something that's wow. It's very, very common to have NOTAMs executed daily.
If I can, I got one other thing to add on NOTAMs, and that is that they are generally broad in area and unspecified in time for a while, because the more specific they are, the more they communicate to the adversary what might be happening. If we say, okay, don't fly along this route, then somebody's air defenses might be particularly attuned into that route. And so they're more general, and that can make them a little more disruptive. But as Norberto said, there's close coordination with civil authorities and with the airlines to try to minimize the disruption.
I think it's important because you may come across those kind of questions. You know, some of these offices don't often get the opportunity to talk. You know, they either don't have constituents who are from Puerto Rico. They don't, you know, they only see what they only know what they see in the news. So you may be asked about how, you know, how the whole process went about before the capture of Maduro, what's happening now. So I think that this gives a good kind of overview of what actually happened and where things stand today. Another, I would say, myth as well, even though we're going to have later on a panel on this, but these are important things and they have to do with national security, is on the Jones Act. That is one of the issues that I've seen has been talked about the much from the perspective of a hindrance to our economy, a hindrance to our consumers. However, economically, the Jones Act underpins the maritime industry by ensuring that shipping between Puerto Rico and U.S. ports is managed by U.S.-built, U.S.-crewed, and U.S.-flagged vessels, providing thousands of jobs and fostering stability in cargo transportation. As you all well know, Puerto Rico imports over 80% of the items it consumes. Therefore, having secure and consistent shipping routes are critical. Admiral Brown, what can you tell us about the benefits of the Jones Act in terms of keeping foreign adversaries like China from overtaking or dominating in shipping, trade, and shipbuildings? How does the Jones Act help keep them away from influencing us, from influencing the United States through Puerto Rico?
Another great question. So the Jones Act was written originally on the heels of World War I, where the U.S. found itself literally unable to deliver to Europe, for the saving of Western Europe, to deliver the men and materials needed to fight World War I. The concept of it actually goes back to the founding of our constitutional republic. In Federalist 11, Alexander Hamilton, a son of the Caribbean, recognized and pointed out that America needed both a strong merchant marine to carry our own trade in our own ships, unconstrained by foreign powers, and a strong military to defend us. If you reread Federalist 11 and mentally substitute China for European powers in there, you'll see we're in exactly the same situation now, where that Asian powers, particularly China, but in the case of shipbuilding, also Korea and Japan, now dominate shipbuilding and worldwide shipping. And as is pointed out in a couple of documents that we've already mentioned, the National Security Strategy, in particular, Secretary of State Rubio's foreign policy strategy, points out that global elites, including in the United States, made misguided bets on free trade. Just making things cheaper is actually detrimental to our national security. And supply chains don't seem vulnerable until they're proven vulnerable, right? So whether it was the oil crisis of the 1970s, whether it was pharmaceuticals during the COVID pandemic, whether it was antimony, a critical mineral just last fall being restricted by China, those vulnerabilities are now in the hands of our adversary, particularly in the terms of shipping and shipbuilding. The Jones Act is designed to preserve and protect America's capacity, not only to build ships, but also to man them and carry cargoes. And President Trump's administration just released a maritime action plan that actually goes even farther, and it really supports the combination of commercial and military maritime industries. And there are a couple of key components to it that I want to point out where, again, if you read this now with how can Puerto Rico contribute here, so there are incentives in the form of maritime prosperity zones, like the opportunity zones of the first Trump administration, to place private and public investment in maritime industrial infrastructure like dry docks, shipyards, but also maritime education and technology centers. There's an opportunity to rebuild the and distribute the maritime base. There's a specific requirement to distribute more broadly America's maritime capacity. It can't all concentrate on the Gulf Coast of the United States, where most of our shipbuilding is now. We need other opportunities, whether that's Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, and these maritime prosperity zones are a way to get there. There's also a call for places to conduct testing of autonomous systems. And they're not necessarily defense systems. They could be just automated shipping, basically driverless ferries, for example. And so, for example, the Port of Ponce, a relatively quiet spot from a maritime traffic perspective, might be a great place with an airport and a port physically close to each other to test a wide variety of autonomous technologies. In other technologies, space. Roosevelt Roads, because it faces to the open Caribbean Sea to the southeast, is an opportunity for space launch and tracking facilities. So there are many opportunities for Puerto Rico to contribute to an enhanced maritime industrial base. The Jones Act and the cargo preference part of it is a relatively small part of a large strategic plan to really improve the economy and the security of the United States. And the economic benefit to Puerto Rico in terms of public investment and employment and education, I think, far outweighs the perceived negatives.
And Director Negroni, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, there's a lot of misconceptions about the Jones Act when it comes to Puerto Rico. First of all, there is international cargo that comes to the island. Actually, the majority of the cargo that comes is international. The Jones Act just requires, like it states, cargo from Puerto Rico to Jacksonville has to be U.S. Crewed ships, U.S. constructed ships, and flagged U.S. ships, right? And there's a lot of benefits to the Jones Act. First of all, there's over 100 jurisdictions that have these type of laws all over the world. If it wasn't for the Jones Act, we wouldn't open the ports 48 hours after Hurricane Maria. Why? Because it gives us a stability, and it requires, and it has certain regulations that requires these Jones Act carriers to activate and start doing the supply of movements necessary for the island to survive. 80% of our cargo is exported. I'm not only talking about food, I'm talking about energy, fuel, infrastructure, supplies. So the Jones Act provides us this type of stability that allows us to, in terms of crisis and emergencies, for us to act and provide the services necessary for the people of the island. Another important factor is when it comes to regulations. It adds an extra layer when it comes to the U.S. Coast Guard, CBP, and the different law enforcement agencies that are dealing with the Jones Act. This gives us an extra layer of national security and protection, especially in the time we're living on with the different conflicts we have all across the world. The Jones Act also allows us to give economic development to the island. Last year, I had the opportunity to go with the Puerto Rican Shipping Association. We had a few meetings with congressmen and allowed us to sell Puerto Rico as this great manufacturing hub and explaining to them how the Jones Act has benefited us in so many different ways. These companies also provide good services to the island. I'm talking about they do a lot of community service. They're great allies when it comes to being a voice to different members of Congress and different federal agencies and about the importance of Puerto Rico and investing in infrastructure. So the Jones Act is positive for the island. And it's important for people to get educated, and we can stop them with the misconceptions that we have in this important law that allows us to have national security, economic development, and allows Puerto Rico to be this great supply and logistical hub. Thank you.
And before Amira Brown expands on what Director Negro mentioned, I just want to clarify that this is also an issue that may come from both sides of the aisle, both Republican and Democrats. There's Republicans who are in favor. There's also Republicans who are against. So this is a question that may come up, and this is kind of some of the background, right? And I appreciate both of you and your expertise on the matter. I'm sorry, Admiral Brown.
Yeah, and Roberto brought up some major good points, and one that I want to emphasize from the national security perspective is that countries that have worked with China or been captured and infiltrated by the People's Republic of China when it comes to port facilities and operations are paying the price right now in loss of sovereignty and security. So, for example, Panama has just chosen, after years of essentially abuse, to kick out Chinese port operators, companies that are controlled by the Communist government of China, who penetrate these port facilities and corruptly operate them in ways that are to the detriment of the U.S. and its allies and partners. In the country of Peru, China is building a port there, and a court in Peru just ruled that the government regulators of Peru have no right to regulate and inspect the port facilities and operations that are going to be run by this Chinese affiliated company that will be done with Chinese people, Chinese workers, inside the country of Peru. So it basically places an island or a potential cancer of an adversary into our economic body, and that is absolutely to be avoided. The Jones Act and the Maritime Action Plan moving forward are ways to fight that cancer, prevent it in advance.
I was going to add, with the Jones Act, we are the United States. Every state of the union,
A little louder.
every state of the union is subject to mercantilism on U.S. flagged ships. We have got to stop allowing the discussion to take place that the Jones Act is something that's just imposed on Puerto Rico because of our colonial status. No, we are the United States. Every state of the union has to follow those regulations. End of story. Number two, this is our military. This is our national military. When you go speak to congressmen and senators, this is our national military. We are proud to be part of our national military. We're proud to once again have our nation's military and Puerto Rico become part of a national security solution for our nation. This is the way that we have to speak. This is the way we have to start talking about Puerto Rico as one, not as two different entities. Third, economic security. Operative word there, security. Close to $100 million in wages for the Jones Act. Over $250 million, actually north of that, closer to $300 million in trade. We're talking now as well as over 650,000 jobs tied to the Jones Act. U.S. citizens on both sides, on the continental United States and in Puerto Rico. That touches a lot of people, touches a lot of homes, touches economic development across the board. Fourth point, 21st century. We've got to start thinking 21st century. Admiral touched on something here a minute ago. Space Force right now is having a hard time launching because Cape Canaveral is overtasked. Number one, Puerto Rico's closer to the equator. Costs drop significantly to get rockets up into a low orbit or medium orbit. Number two, it's an island. Water, that's a major requirement. These are the type of industries we have got to start pulling to Puerto Rico. High-paying, high-end jobs. We got Universidad de Mayagüez, we got La Politécnica. 90% of those graduating classes go where? To NASA. They go work on the continental United States. We can keep them in Puerto Rico and working in these jobs. Admiral spoke about dry docks. Last January of last year, 2025, the President signed an executive order on maritime security. Why? Because our naval ships, it's a national security issue, our naval ships cannot get refitted and fixed quick enough. So we have a line of naval ships lined up that cannot get into a dry dock to be fixed. That is a cornerstone of our national security policy, the over-the-horizon reach. So again, we need to speak in terms of how we fit into this national security solution for our nation. And trust me, you speak those type of terms, and they're going to love you. You follow it up with a bottle of Don Q or Bacardi.
Even more. Thank you,
or
Senator.
Barrilito, you won them over.
One more
To add what the secretary said, 21st century, that's why the government of Puerto Rico has over $100 million of federal funds to rebuild the piers in Puerto Nuevo and San Juan. Because like he said, we need port facilities for the 21st century. This also includes over $60 million of local money to add to these projects so we could also cover the cost-sharing part of it. So the governor has been very adamant. She's been focused on having better port infrastructure, and we have over $160 million that we're going to inaugurate and start during this administration. That's very important that you guys delivered the message that we are prioritizing port infrastructure and airports. This turns Puerto Rico into a great logistical military hub, but it also turns Puerto Rico into a great hub for manufacturing and other types of industries.
Thank you. And we can't talk about America's preeminence in the Western Hemisphere. We can't talk about national security without talking about our U.S. military. So I just want to thank, I know we have veterans in the group. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you all for your service, because you are as well having part of the military. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts here on how we can argue for statehood based on the proud military track record that the Puerto Ricans have fighting in every war since World War I. Just 2 sentences each, and I gotta wrap up.
Quickly. Puerto Ricans have been fighting for our nation since the United States War of Revolution, 1774, 1776. So that's how far it dates back. That having and continuing to serve my nation now for 31 years, it's the greatest honor and privilege that I could be bestowed upon me. It's something that carries you. So you can imagine every veteran that has been out there who has served his nation, our nation. It's something that we carry heavy. Norberto carries very heavy. The Admiral carries very heavy. And it's something we're very proud of. I just want to take a small minute to please remember in your prayers today those that are at the leading edge of battle right now, be it in Iran, be it in Operation Southern Spear, be it in over 80 nations that our servicemen and women are currently located today. Keep them in your prayers. They're away from home, their families, their loved ones, and those are the ones, less than half of 1%, that put on the uniform every day and go out and defend our nation. So keep them in your prayers.
It's important for people to know, like Secretary said, there's Puerto Rican U.S. members. We got Medal of Honor winners that were Puerto Rican. So I've only served in the military. I'm not a real admiral or general like my colleagues right next to me. I served 4 years in active duty, and that was 20 years ago, and it was the proudest 4 years of my life. To this day, I still have that honor. I live by that code, and it's important for every single member to understand that we are U.S. citizens, that we are part of America, we are part of the United States, that we serve the military, that we have great businessmen, that we have great people in the island, and that we are a great point for strategy, and us being a state will be a gain for this great nation.
Some of you know that my first Coast Guard duty station was in Puerto Rico. I was stationed on a cutter in Old San Juan. I then spent the next 3 years on Navy ships in and out of Roosevelt Roads doing drug enforcement in the Caribbean. I worked in, I mentioned our district for a long time. Had many interactions with Puerto Rico, with Governor Gonzalez Colon when she was resident commissioner, helped commission one of the fast response cutters that now patrols Puerto Rico waters. And then, as Gabby mentioned, my final work in the Coast Guard was as the President's Special Representative for Puerto Rico disaster recovery. So Puerto Rico, and particularly the military in Puerto Rico, remains very near and dear to my heart. I just want to point out one other thing. When you think about what our adversaries are doing in the Western Hemisphere, and they are very close. Secretary Garfer mentioned Antigua and Barbuda, right? They're very close. Dominican Republic, they're very close. Venezuela, they're very close. Just think about the language in which we discuss what our adversaries are doing. Investment is not investment, it's infiltration. Employment is not employment, it's infection. They're coming in to basically replace our workforce in what we're doing, okay? So remember those things, that the way that our adversary is operating is specifically to the weakening of America, including Puerto Rico. So please remember that. We talked about how important the soldiers, sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen from Puerto Rico have been to the defense of the United States. The national security of the United States now depends at least as much on what we choose to do economically going forward in the Western Hemisphere, particularly in Puerto Rico. So thank you for the work that you're about to do to help make that happen.
Thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you to all of our veterans and service members. Appreciate it.
Si pueden, manténganse un momento en la tarima para tomarle la foto grupal, que se tome, no sé si los muchachos tienen la cámara. Secretario, para la foto.